Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Superstitious Gymnasium Opportunity. So, listeners, we have a very special guest joining us today. He is the managing editor of the illustrious and now 200-year-old Saturday Evening Post. He runs a word nerd a word nerd column of his own called In a Word. And he, at one point, and probably still sometimes if he gets the time, freelance editor. Anyway, if there's words to be had and talked about, Andy Hollandbeck is the guy, and we have him, so he's going to be joining us for some words. Woo!
Hi, everybody.
Andy, how did you come to be doing all these things?
Through the back door, I think, kind of. When I went to college, I just knew I wanted to be in a creative field. I was a musician. I was taking art classes, really I wanted to be a writer. And so when I had to make a choice, I decided, well, none of my favorite writers actually had a degree in English. So that was the first to go. And I ended up majoring in music. I was a clarinet performance major.
Nice. And
minoring in art. There's not enough hours in the week to do both art and music with all the practicing and the creating everything. So I dropped the art minor. I got a degree in music. And then afterwards, I still had, publishing in my head, and I wanted to get into publishing. And sadly, to a certain degree, I've always been good at picking out mistakes in writing, pissing a lot of people off in the process. Yeah. So I ended up getting a job in proofreading at, first it was a company that made catalogs, which is a horrifying experience. But then I got in at a place called IDG doing those old yellow For Dummies books.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
And then they were bought out by Wiley Publishing. So I worked my way up from proofreading to copy editing, and then I was in there online. I was an online editor for a while. And then, I was hooked. I was a professional copy editor, and that's kind of how I ended up at the Post. They needed a new copy editor.
I really feel like I'm a copy editor in my soul, but I don't know if I could deal with the rampant self-loathing of being that person who always picks out the mistakes. Mm-hmm. Because as a teacher, obviously I do my share of that, but I hate it. I mean, yeah, I think I love the overwhelming sense of being right and knowing the answer, but yeah, it's I suppose there's less of a kind of a personal connection within a professional publishing setup than when you're saying to a 12-year-old, dude, capital letters.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think there are certainly stages that every professional copy editor goes through. And the first one is, I know everything about English, so you have to do what I say. And this is the stage where you twitch when somebody uses decimate to mean, destroyed to a large degree. But then, over time, with experience, you mellow out and you realize, how alive the language is. And how etymology does not tell us what a word means, and all that sort of stuff. And you realize that it's the communication and voice and all that stuff that grammar can take a back seat to all those other things that are more important.
This is so lovely because, I don't know that this has any great scientific basis, but I believe that people generally get more right wing as they get older. So it's quite nice to think that in the world of language, the opposite happens.
Oh,
we all
that's
start
absolutely
out
true.
Really prescriptivist, and then everyone just chills out a bit.
Well, yeah, I think part of it is that the longer you go, the more you read great works, and you find these little things that, well, that's not grammatically correct, or I would never he just started a sentence with but, no, all that sort of stuff. And then you realize, no, this is great writing, despite the fact that it may not even be grammatical, or it doesn't follow the rules that somebody taught me in ninth grade English.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. It's an interesting situation that I grew up at a time, and I was educated at a time in the UK where, in Scotland specifically, we have our own education system, but grammar wasn't really a big deal. So we learned what nouns and verbs and adjectives were, and that was kind of, we probably had a class here and there on prepositions and that sort of thing, but it wasn't kind of instructed. We weren't instructed in grammar. And because I am a massive geek, and also because as I got older I started to study Latin and French to some extent, I was like, oh, grammar is the coolest thing ever in the world. You can tell I was a hit at parties in my teenage life. But it's like, oh, grammar is so incredibly cool. And most of the grammar that I know, that I now kind of use to inform the things that I do at work and I'm writing and things like that, I didn't actually learn as a school pupil. But these days, in the UK, the English system that they're using, there's been this horrendous, super prescriptive curriculum brought in that states that 10-year-olds have to learn what fronted adverbials are. And the fronted adverbial has kind of become shorthand for this whole nonsense. And there's a wonderful poet called Michael Rosen who you should check out if you have kids and just if you like words. And Michael Rosen writes poetry about things like, he has an amazing poem about waking up in the middle of the night when he was a kid and finishing off a chocolate cake that his mum had baked and trying to get away with it. And he is just furious at this notion that little kids are being told that your writing is only good if it has a fronted adverbial in it. And this is what makes good quality writing. He's like, jeez. Who are we to tell kids what makes good writing?
Yeah. Plus, fronted adverbial sounds like something you need to book an orthodontist appointment for.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It sounds expensive.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Jones, your child has a fronted adverbial. Oh.
Yeah. So I'm glad that copy editors move and breathe, and I'm thinking of a really fine piece of wooden furniture that kind of ages out and gets really comfortable, shifts a little bit as it gets older. Yeah. Cool.
Seems nice. So speaking of words.
Do you want me to go first? What do you think?
I'll go first. I have a little one.
Okay.
Today, and we'll just I'll kick us off. So, my word today is opportunity.
Ooh.
And I don't know. Seemed like a surprisingly and possibly anachronistically optimistic word to choose, given gestures broadly at everything. But so as opportunity, and this is one of those. I don't know. I always find it interesting to see what super common words hit, like land or don't, as far as when you start looking into them, because sometimes it's like the key is to get something really bizarre and, like we were saying earlier, esoteric. But I think everyone kind of gets the idea of an opportunity, a set of favorable circumstances, a description of a time when things are just a good time for doing a thing. And but I'm not. As I was going through this, it's not clear whether opportunity the noun or opportune the adjective are earlier. Oh, okay. They both made it into English around the turn of the 15th century. And chances are they were both used together because they both come from different, both Latin and French words, which is weird. So the origins in English of this word are a bit muddy for a couple of different reasons. They're not sure, like I say, they're not sure which one was first. Nobody seems really sure whether it comes specifically from the French opportunité or Latin opportunitatem, but those were both words that were being used in their various, like people who used Latin used that, people who spoke French spoke that, and they both showed up around the same time. So, cool. And ultimately French comes from Latin anyway, so we're interested in earlier stuff than this anyway, so that's something that other nerds can argue about. The Latin opportunus which means fit, favorable, convenient, suitable, etc. That's the ultimate origin of both the French and the Latin words that borrowed their way into English. And this comes from a Latin phrase. And so it's sort of like how we get goodbye as a cramming together of the phrase "God be with you," or "God be with ye." Same kind of idea. Opportunus comes from the phrase "ob portum veniens," was a Latin phrase, and it's a nautical expression, meaning coming toward a port. And it refers specifically to winds. So it's a nautical expression that is the specific set of circumstances where the winds are kind of just really super handy for bringing a ship into port. If they're in the right direction, everything lines up. You don't have to do any of the, I don't know. I'm an expert sailor, as you can tell by my dropping of the jargon. You don't have to do any of the fiddly mucking about stuff.
Remember that time that I asked you if you knew about boats, and you were like, no, goodness me, no, I've seen a boat once.
Yeah, I know which side of a boat I want to be on. It's the top. And, there you have it. So, ob portum veniens is where that comes from, which I thought was kind of interesting because I'd never put that together, and maybe I'm alone in that, but port is right there. So it's one of those things where as soon as you hear that...
exactly what I'm thinking. I'm having one of those mental, of course, moments that happen so often with etymology. To the port. Yeah. Yeah.
And so port originally comes from a PIE root per, P-E-R, meaning to lead or to pass over. And there are loads of cognates with this one. It's a really long, you look up in the American Heritage Dictionary, PIE roots index, and you get a load of different branches and sections of the family tree. So firth and fjord come from this, which makes sense because you've got the port, harbor, nautical passage connection. All of the port words that come from portare in Latin, to carry. So export, import, portable, deportation, all that stuff, come from the carry side of things.
Right.
If you've ever, farewell, that F-A-R-E, to fare, how are you faring, wayfarer, welfare, that all comes from Old English faran, or feren, meaning to go on a journey. And so you're passing over land or whatever it is you're faring across. The ferry. Like F-E...
Of course. The ferry.
Yeah, F-E-R-R-Y. So that comes from the same thing. We were speaking of German earlier. Führer comes from this, as in leader.
Satisfying academic noises.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then the doorway words, because French, port, meaning door. So that's the gateway, the passage. So a porter, porch. Portcullis is interesting because it's actually just literally means a sliding gate or a sliding door. And I don't know, portcullis, that's the big iron gate that would slide down in a castle.
I feel like I want to use that word more. So anytime I come across a sliding door from now on, I'm basically just going to call it a portcullis.
All pocket doors are now portcullises.
Yep.
Exactly. I was just going to say that I'm never using the phrase pocket door again because portcullis is right there and it's so much cooler.
What is a pocket door?
Oh, pocket doors are amazing. I guess I don't know. I didn't think this was a regional thing. So a pocket door, you'll find them they're used less frequently now. I think because of the maintenance issues of once they break, you're just screwed.
Yeah, you don't want a door to break, do you?
Houses are... Sometimes there are some older houses, I guess, in North America, that are built where the door just, literally slides out of the wall. Mm-hmm. And there's usually, a clasp to keep it closed if it's a door you need to keep closed. But rather than having it swing, it just slides back into the wall. Kind of like the doors on the Enterprise in Star Trek.
All right. Oh.
Yeah.
They're a real thing that people have in houses?
They're a real thing that people have in houses, yeah.
Wow.
They're great for small spaces if you don't have enough space for the door to swing open completely.
I suppose that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's good. I think the reason they're older is because everyone went, this is a great idea. And then 35 years later, when all the mechanisms started going and you couldn't get the door open or closed, they all went, wait, And then often what happens is they just build a slightly smaller door frame and put a regular door in.
I have to inform you of this wonderful factoid. I'd like to think it's common knowledge, but probably it's not. But if you want to make the noise of the doors on the Starship Enterprise, here is what you must do. With a finger or thumb, close one of your nostrils, then blow out of your other nostril. That's the noise of the doors on the Starship Enterprise. I'd like to think that pocket doors make the same noise, but I don't know if that's true.
Well, maybe blow your nose first.
That's definitely a plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one wants a snotty door, do they?
Well, I tell you, if we were naming episodes based on the quote from the episode, that would be... Welcome to this episode. Today's episode is No One Wants a Snotty Door. So yeah, that's all I got for opportunity, but it's a nice little quick little hit, but I thought it was kind of cool that it's...
Yeah.
Because I did not see it coming, that it was going to be an amalgam of a Latin phrase meaning to bring a ship into a harbor.
Not at all. And what about opportunity knocks?
That's a much... I did see that. I don't remember the date because I didn't jot it down, but it's
sure.
I want to say that's late 1800s.
Right.
But it's much later that it sort of became a standalone thing long after. I mean, it seems like I'm not alone in having not known that it was originally a phrase and a nautical expression, because everything has been stripped from that. From the beginning, it became sort of the standalone, just sort of a favorable set of circumstances, and chance comes a knocking. But I didn't actually note down where that comes from or when that first showed up. I should have done that.
I love nautical words, and there are so many. I mean,
there's so many.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, haven't we? You know, because being at sea is basically like being in your own country. And I suppose in the way
with
that,
like 12 guys,
you know, like even families will come up with their own kind of shorthand linguistic tricks and jokes and that sort of thing. So you can easily see how it happened on boats.
Yeah, and it's very specific as well. So it's understandable that you'd get jargon for the various technical terms, as well as just sort of the linguistic shorthands, because it's a unique circumstance to be in.
Yeah, and
we're finding out with the Suez Canal right now.
Oh my goodness!
Now I've time-stamped this episode for future posterity.
I'm just flabbergasted by this. I didn't know this. I should explain, Andy. Ryan and I had a conversation about this yesterday, because I didn't know this was happening until yesterday afternoon, when I saw some sort of cartoon or meme. I can't even remember what it was originally, and I actually thought that the cartoon was just. Wouldn't it be hilarious if this happened? Kind of. I thought that someone had just created this imaginary, holy shit, that's a massive pain in the backside situation. You know, sort of an overblown, ridiculous situation of what a pisser. And then someone had commented on it, and I was like, wait, what now? So
for future historians that are listening, someone who finds this in a canister somewhere, or anyone who, like Amy, who just has not heard of this. You're welcome in advance. Right now, there is a 400-meter long, 200,000-ton container ship sideways across the Suez Canal after someone had the single most epically terrible day at work ever, because the ship got lost in a storm in the Red Sea and drew a giant penis using their navigational instruments completely by accident, and then got stuck in the Suez Canal. And at this exact moment, as we are recording this on March 26th, 2021, 10% of global trade depends on one guy with an excavator trying to dig out a 200,000-ton boat.
You just, I can't grasp any of that. I just can't. When I realised it was a real, true thing, I laughed my ass off. I just couldn't do anything but laugh. No. It was like this.
and here's how my mind is miswired. This has been going on for 3 days?
Yeah.
And until last night, I kept reading, Suez Canal and this boat and everything for the last 3 days until last night. My mind has been picturing the Panama Canal. So
Right.
in my head, I've been thinking, we're not getting anything to California right now. And I'm seeing these maps that even show people now going around the Cape Horn in South Africa,
Cape of Hope, yeah.
to get their deliveries made. And like, well, why are they showing us this when the problem is down in the Panama Canal? Geography is not my strong suit.
I love when that happens. I love this kind of. I had the same thing happen last. A completely different thing, but the same thing nonetheless. I have two very close friends who have the same first name, and we are in a group chat. And one of those friends was having a massive clear out, and in the group chat she had asked the chat if anyone wanted various items that she was clearing out, and then there was a message about a chest freezer. Would anyone like a chest freezer? And I'm like, oh, I could totally do with a chest freezer in my garage. That would be really useful. And so I said, oh yeah, I'd really like it. And my friends sent me the measurements of the freezer, and I was like, yeah, cool. So then later in the week, my friend messaged me to say, do you still want the freezer? At which point I realised it was the other friend who was offering me the chest freezer, not the one who'd been having the clear out. The one who has just closed a commercial catering business and is getting rid of the enormous chest freezer. What I did was I went, oh yeah, of course, it's they're the guys getting rid of the freezer. And then my friend said, do you know someone with a van? And I'm like, oh, is it? How big is it? I thought I would just be able to put it in the back of the car. And they're like, when you used to come for lunch and you would sit on the chest freezer to eat your lunch in the back of the shop? I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm dreaming. That's not going in my car. Not even close. And yeah, it's just my whole brain was totally invested in the sense that my friend had found a small and manageable chest freezer while clearing out her garage that would go into mine. But no, in fact, it's the Suez Canal.
It was the Suez Canal all along.
But yeah, it's just, and it really drives home to you. Like, I am such a spoiled Westerner, because who knew that cargo ships could have 3 weeks added on to their journey by having to go around Africa? Like these
that's
days,
still a thing now.
These days, I'm pissed off if I can't get next day delivery.
That's right.
You're like, but it must be somewhere. Why can't I have it now? And you just, like, I've just lost the sense of, I feel like a 1940s evacuee who'd never seen a cow,
Yeah.
It's just that whole, I've completely lost contact with the notion that the things that make up our lives come from really, really far away, and we have to get them to us. They have to get them here somehow. And yeah. 10% of the world's trade is another one of the numbers involved in this situation that doesn't really fit in my head, because that sounds like, you sort of think, 10% is not that much. And then you think, no, Amy, of all the boats in the world.
10% of all of the stuff
that ever goes anywhere by water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolute madness.
No, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So how are they even getting it? How are they going to get it out?
Have you seen the picture with the lone crane trying to dig out the front of it?
Yeah, the one little excavator just.
Yeah. I saw a great meme of it the other day describing the little crane trying to dig it out was a semicolon, and the sideways boat was an 8-page long sentence, and the semicolon was just trying to keep the whole thing together and going.
Andy, this is why we brought you here, for jokes like that. 120%.
The memes that have come out of this are just are just awesome. It's that image, though, for me is the perfect encapsulation of the last year and a bit. Like this massive, stupid, enormous, in the way thing. Yeah. And then the excavator is all of us doing like the little, like I had a little bit more cheese today than normal because that's what I got to do to get through this stupid mess. it's like this weirdly Sisyphean task. And you just kind of keep doing it because you do the things you got to do to get through it.
And even though you know it's completely futile, you just, for your sanity and your health, you keep plugging away and just getting on with the stuff that you're told to do, even though you know it's doing nothing. Yeah.
But the best part is that it actually, like, it is working. Like, that's the most amazing thing to me is that you see, like, because on day, like, 1, excavator dude, who should never have to buy food or beer again, ever, was sitting there, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, it's like when someone's trying to build a house, they're digging a hole for a foundation, and the general contractor's kid shows up with a spoon. Like, that's adorable.
Let's just give that guy 25% of whatever's on that ship.
Yes, he gets to pick a container. Just choose one. Pick the one that says Porsche or Nissan on it. Do it. Because it's like, but the first one is he's just digging beside this stupidly big ass boat.
Yeah, I can't get my head around the size of boats.
You can see the what's, I guess the technical term is bulbous bow, which makes me feel better about all my quote technical terms. But you can see it then, and there was like one of the Suez Canal Authority people kind of put out a thing saying, it's now, the boat is now resting on the shore instead of being impaled in the Egyptian desert. And it's like, holy crap, it actually is doing a thing. Like, it's, the kid with a spoon is going to dig this foundation for us, and he should get he should get the stuff on that boat.
God, like, have I ever told you the story? I'm thinking about the scale of boats that carry things like that.
It's crazy.
My family and I once took the ferry to France, right? Now, that is a thing that's very commonly done from the UK because, we're an island nation. And we drove to wherever the port was. So my mum, my dad, my sister and I. And we got to the port. I don't remember which port it was. Maybe Ramsgate. I don't think it was Dover. It was a slightly longer crossing. Anyway, details. And we joined the stacks, the queues of cars to get into this massive, massive ferry. And it was an enormous ferry. The sort of boat that when you stand next to it, you feel like there's no way you're not going to drown. That kind of thing. Because how can this thing float? And while we were waiting in the queues were enormous. And it was like, oh, we've been in the car all day. God, this is going to take forever. And there was like one random guy patrolling about with a high-vis vest on, doing not very much. So all 3 of the women in the situation needed to go to the toilet. And so did my dad. But we're like, look, wait here with the car. We're going to go to the toilet. We'll come back. And then you can go. Nothing's moving here at all. So off we went to the toilet where there was an enormous queue because it's always the way. And then we went to go back to the car, which wasn't there anymore. And the cars obviously had been moving because this big space that had been full of cars was no longer quite so full of cars. And we were trying to find high-vis vest dude to kind of, and it was just, and we're next to this enormous hulk, like it was like bigger than a skyscraper, this boat, and jeez. We're kind of standing like, what do we do now? And this was, of course, in the bad old days before mobile phones existed. So we'd just lost my dad and the car and our lives, so we're standing on the dock, just like, what are we going to do? And then we hear this noise. And right at the top of this enormous boat, there is this tiny, 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 tiny little white dot. And it's my dad. And he is waving and screaming. Oh. I have no idea how we heard it. Like, he was so far away. And so he's on the boat and we're outside. So we make our way around to the bit where they board like non-car passengers, and they're like, oh, this isn't open yet. We're only boarding car passengers. And we're like, no, we are car passengers. We've just missed our car. And they're like, what? And eventually they let us on and we found our dad. But it was like, it's one of these memories that it never fails to make me absolutely hose myself laughing. The image of my poor dad waving his jumper and screaming from the top of this huge boat. It's just amazing.
200 yards above you.
Like, as soon as we'd left the car, the guy started moving them on. And he's like, no, I have to wait. And the guy's like, no, you have to go or you're not getting on the boat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Murphy's Law.
Anyway, that was all from Opportunity. Which in itself is pretty, coming into port is much more interesting than you would think.
Yeah.
I love that it's, like you say, port's right there. It's right there in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep.
It makes perfect sense once you see it.
Cool.
So yeah, there's opportunity. So now that Andy's had a taste of what our interrupting,
so much interrupting,
tangent-filled academic
That's what makes conversations interesting. All right, so shall we move on to my word then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that where you're going? Okay.
Take it away.
So the word I have chosen is gymnasium.
Ooh.
Love it.
Or gymnast, if it makes a better title for the podcast.
Right.
I love how you think about these things, Andy, because we never do.
So I'm gonna go straight to the root here because that's the most interesting part. It goes back to Old Greek gymnos. Or gymnos, who knows how these were pronounced? But it was the word for naked. So from that we get gymnasium, which the boring part is it never actually meant to exercise in the nude. Even by then, gymnasium meant to exercise or train, and then you get a gymnasion in Greek, which was a place where athletic exercises are practiced. Right. But it all goes back to being naked, which I thought was surprising. It was let me double check. Yeah, when I started doing in a word, I had the idea in mind that I was going to pick words that everybody already knew, but that had surprising etymologies. And gymnast, when I saw that, was like, oh, I got to do that one because I had no idea. So that was the very first word I did on in a word was that cool. word. So it goes back to, exercising in Greek, but before that it's from naked. But the gymnos has, in other areas, kept that nakedness streak. So in botany, we've got gymnosperm, which is a seed that is not protected by anything like an ovary or anything. It just sort of hangs out.
Cool.
So it's a naked seed, and the gymnospore is the same thing. And when I was looking at this, or looking in the dictionary and researching this, I saw a word that I'd never seen before, gymnosophist. Or to break it up so it's more clearly understandable, gymnosophist.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
So
someone who thinks about naked people?
No, it's the doing, not the thinking. According to Merriam-Webster, there were these ancient Indian ascetics who would meditate in the nude.
Oh, okay.
So basically, they were naked wise men.
Right.
Sophron is wisdom, isn't it? Nice.
That's
interesting.
Yes.
Well, certainly those ancient Indians didn't call themselves gymnosophists.
Right. That would be weird.
That would be weird to pick a word from a completely different area of the world to call themselves.
I don't know, that would be weird, but I feel like it's not out of the realms of etymological possibility.
Well, anything's possible. But as I mentioned before, I'm also a musician. I play the piano as well. And Eric, the French composer Eric Satie, has these well-known pieces called Gymnopédie.
That's right, yeah.
And so I'm looking at this word. So I see the gymno, which means naked, and then we got pédie, P-E-D-I-E, and I'm like, okay, is that the pet of pedestrian? Is it naked feet?
Yeah,
or is it the pet of pediatrician? Is it naked children? Neither choice seems optimal.
I mean, one's certainly better than the other.
Well, yes. So I did a little more digging. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, and I'm just going to read this quote directly.
Yeah.
The word gymnopédie was derived from a festival of ancient Sparta at which young men danced and competed against each other unencumbered by clothing.
It's the naked children.
It's the naked children.
Yes, it is. It is. I probably more linked to the pedia of encyclopedia, which they think goes back to paideia, too many vowels, P-A-I-D-E-I-A, which is linked to children, but it means child rearing, and then that evolved into education in general.
Right, yes.
So Eric Satie's gymnopedie, the idea is that they're not strenuous. They're piano exercises, but they're not strenuous piano exercises.
That's
Apparently, he is known to have introduced himself as a gymnopediste. But Satie was eccentric, I believe, is a nice way to put it.
Seems fair.
Yeah.
Wow.
He apparently he only ate foods that were white, just to give you a taste of how eccentric he was.
Wow.
That's awesome, and really, really limiting. Like I can think of 3.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, yeah.
Well, luckily pills are probably white.
Oh,
Yeah,
fair
I
enough.
suppose. So he didn't necessarily have to die of malnutrition immediately. But
Yes.
rice, anything milk-based,
Cauliflower.
cauliflower, yeah. Bread,
His diet is
depending on how
literally
strict you are.
nothing but plain flour, rice, and just mountains of cocaine. That's it.
Amounts of cocaine.
That's it. What else
Hadn't
do you
thought of
need?
that. Yeah.
Little cocaine in your milk in the morning, get you going right.
Right, there you go.
That's wild. I do love stories of eccentric composers. But as you say, eccentric is usually like I feel like these days that word is used to describe people who are like slightly amusingly odd, whereas in ye olde past it sort of meant sociopath.
Nobody could do eccentric like people in ye olde past.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, apparently Benjamin Britten, the English composer, apparently he would get up and piss in the corner of a room if he had gotten fed up talking to somebody. He just.
it's just.
That's an effective way to end a conversation.
It's true, yeah.
This is what I mean. Like, now you get people who are like, oh, he's so eccentric. I don't know. his
Sometimes
socks
wears
don't match.
jazzy
And it's like, yeah, exactly. Like, sometimes he's got a cartoon character on his tie, even though he's a doctor. Isn't that amazing? Like, no. You want to do eccentric, you are going to be a world famous composer who also just spends most of his weekends flinging like mud and feces at people who happen to go by his hovel,
Yeah.
which he has outside of his mansion that he owns,
Yeah.
instead of living in the mansion. Like, Victorian eccentrics.
Victorian
man.
eccentrics
It's just,
they really did know how to do eccentric back in those
they
days.
just nailed it.
That's so cool.
good.
Do you know, it's again, Andy, I'm baffled by how I've never thought about this before, because gymnopédie is, they're pretty famous pieces of music, and like you say, you learn them early on when you're learning to play the piano, or fairly early on, because they're accessible and they're really pretty. So yeah, naked children. I have to say that the notion of ease doesn't particularly line up with what I know about the Spartans. I kind of feel like the competitions of Spartan children were probably pretty badass by anyone's standards.
Yes.
Yeah.
But apparently this was a specific festival, so maybe the festival is when they take the day off from, stabbing each other repeatedly and just do some light exercises.
Light to mild stabbing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so
Arm
cool.
wrestling. I don't know.
They limited at broken bones.
The most interesting gymnos word that I can think of, I have been trying for many years to use this as part of a teaching series of lessons, and it always falls flat. I think it's just too complicated. But there is a text called the Progymnasmata, and it's about instructing students in rhetoric. And basically, it's a series of exercises. So I assumed that the etymology of progymnasmata, for exercise, but had no idea that the gymnos part referred to the nudity of the exercisers way back when.
It's really just a body positivity book.
But it's cool, the progymnasmata, because while it was being used, back in the days of ancient Greece to instruct scholars in rhetoric, and then was used throughout the sort of classical era and into the Middle Ages even, it also instructs you in techniques that are alive and well today. If you want to write like I said about the Klaxon advert, it's just full of persuasive techniques. And some of those they would directly come out of forums that you find in the Pro Gymnasmata. Cool.
Very cool. Nice.
Cool.
All right. You're up.
Oh, I'd completely forgotten. Yeah, right enough. I have a word.
Hey, super.
So, this is here's how I got to thinking about this word. I really love to attach the prefix, prefix. I never know how to say it. I kind of alternate between the two because I can never quite decide. So the prefix super, I really enjoy attaching to other adjectives as a kind of an intensifier.
Right.
So, super fucking cool, one of my most favourites, because it's almost got a wee Mimesis going on in it, not quite. But I feel like it's that. So I'll often describe things as being super cool or super amazing or and I don't really know where I picked this habit up. I certainly haven't been doing it my whole life, but I do like to describe things as super adjective. Yeah. And I found myself, I read a really lovely kids book this week that was largely set around the culture of Latin American brujeria or witchcraft. And this was a kind of a set of traditions that I didn't really know anything about at all. So the book was interesting for lots of reasons, but this kind of side of this culture that was new to me, I was really interested to learn a little bit about it, about the brujo and the bruja and the various different countries' traditions that have kind of fed into this notion of witchcraft. And a brujo or a bruja, usually translated as witch, but it's like a witch doctor or a sorcerer or a healer. It's one of these words that's got quite a lot of shades within it, if you like.
Right.
And I was reading a little bit, I was just doing a little bit of research about this, just to add to my own knowledge out of my own interest. And I came across the word superstition. And I wondered if it was possible to be stitious. And then somebody got really, really extra superstitious. And I wondered if that was how the word had been born. So off I went to the OED to have a look, where I found that, disappointingly enough, that's not what happened. But nonetheless, it was an interesting enough word for me to have a little look at. So the OED, starting with the noun, because nouns usually predate adjectives, at least certainly in the patterns that we found. It dates from around about 1230. Somewhere around about 1200 is as close as the OED is willing to get to. And this particular meaning, the earliest meaning given, is an action characterised by superfluity or excess, which I really liked because I'm a bit of a superstitious person with my super adjectives and my general excessiveness. So this particular sense, it was an action characterised by superfluity or excess from about 1230. And then we have it cited in 1755 as excessive scrupulousness. This is an obsolete sense or a rare sense that's given in Johnson's Dictionary of the English Language. Johnson defines it as over nicety, exactness, or too scrupulous. However, the senses that relate to belief, the first citation we get is around about 1384 from, once again, the Wycliffite Bible.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then the word is reliably and regularly cited from 1384 all the way to 2004. And this particular sense is given as a religious belief or practice considered to be irrational, unfounded, or based on fear or ignorance, excessively credulous belief in and reverence for the supernatural. Which I thought was quite an interesting definition, because an excessively credulous belief in something and an excessive reverence for the supernatural seems to have come to mean the same thing as being irrational or fearful or crazy, which I found really interesting, given that in 1384 people would devote their lives to God by going to live in a cave, And that was a socially acceptable thing to do. You know, I'm off to join the monastery where they will wake me up every 3 hours in the middle of the night to recite a different prayer. To me, that seems like an excessively credulous belief in and reverence for the supernatural. But in those days, that was what the monks did. So I did kind of like that slight shade between the within the definition. And then we get to number 4, a religious system considered to be irrational, unfounded, or based on fear or ignorance, a false, pagan, or idolatrous religion. And this earliest citation for this is about 1425. So you can see that within these different definitions, there's certainly a sense of excessive something, and that there seems to be this idea of belief or faith going on. So from reading this, I assumed that the super was the intensifier and that the stitio bit, the stition, if you like, would have something to do with faith or with belief or something along those lines. And it doesn't. It doesn't at all. It actually comes originally from the PIE root sta, S-T-A, which means to stand, to make, or to be firm. The super part of superstition is Etym Online gives it as super as in above. And it literally means to stand above or to stand over.
Interesting.
That's kind of the noise that I made when I read this too.
So is the opposite of superstitious understand?
Oh, Andy, I like that a lot.
I was going to go with...
Get there.
I was originally thinking substitious, but now understand seems to fit better.
Well, I'm really glad that you asked this, because I said to my husband last night, recording tomorrow, he said, what's your word? I said, superstition. And he said to me, is the opposite of superstition substition? And I said,
substandard.
I said, I don't know, but I'm going to have a look. And I discovered that certainly in the Urban Dictionary, the word substitious appears. And I didn't check to see if it was in the OED, which I really should have done, because there is a written citation from a Terry Pratchett novel. And since, everything I know about the entire universe I learned from reading Terry Pratchett books, I went to have a look. I was very annoyed because I own the book, but it's at my mum's house, and right now you can't go into other people's houses and all that jazz. But I downloaded it. I bought it on Kindle, and I read it again because I love reading Terry Pratchett books. And it's from a novel called Jingo, and the basic plot of this novel is that an island rises up from the bottom of the ocean, and when it does this, there is an Ankh-Morpork fisherman there, and there is a Clatchian fisherman there, and of course they both say this land belongs to us, and that's the kind of root of the situation. But it's all about political wranglings and the stupidities of war. There's a character in it called 71 Hour Ahmed, and he is the character about whom this word has been created. So Pratchett says, 71 Hour Ahmed was not superstitious. He was substitious, which put him in a minority among humans. He didn't believe in the things everyone believed in, but which nevertheless weren't true. He believed instead in the things that were true, in which no one else believed. There are many such substitions, ranging from, it'll get better if you don't pick at it, all the way up to, sometimes things just happen. So 71 Hour Ahmed is the poster child for being substitious. But so I really like the opposite being understand. This PIE root gives us a dizzying number of cognates. Super, I could almost talk about super all by itself. It's a really great, sometimes usually prefix/prefix, but
don't actually do that, Amy, because I already have a piece half written about the super prefix for my column.
Ah, really? Awesome. Well, I'll shut my face and I'll direct everyone to the Saturday Evening Post to say, find out what wonderful things Andy has to say about this. Oh, that's really cool. I like that a lot. So yeah, super duper and super duper whooper if you're really excited, or indeed originally superstitious. And then we have sta, S-T-A. So as usual, when I'm looking at pirates, I started off on Etim Online, and then I went to have a look at the wonderful resource from the University of Austin at Texas that I mentioned a couple of months ago, which really is great. It's just, there's so much information there, and it's laid out really well. It's very clear and easy to have a look at. So some of the more interesting cognates for sta, we have all of the stans, as in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Kazakhstan.
Oh, awesome.
And words, the sort of more obviously stan words, things like apostate, obstetric, stanchion, stand. We also get to things like steer, stem, stern. We get Taurus. That's a bit of an interesting one. Estate.
Right.
Obstacle, going back to the Suez Canal. Solstice, stable, statue, of course. All of these words, which ultimately have somewhere in their etymology this notion of either standing up or setting down, making or to be firm. The derivatives, the kind of stan derivatives, largely mean a place or a thing that is standing. So the place in which I presume, these people stand. And then the wonderful etymology resource at the University of Texas at Austin, words that were a little bit less obvious to me, words like constable. Like, yeah, of course. And ecstasy. Now, we've talked about ecstasy before, and the sense of standing outside yourself, this ecstatic state, seemed to me to almost kind of shoot back towards that sense of being overly religious and really excessively kind of pious and having too much belief. Also, ultimately, we have a cognate in the word post.
Oh.
As in Saturday evening. And that was a complete accident on my part. I'd love to tell you that I was really clever and I wove it in there, but that's just how it went. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of substance, stool, all these different words take us to superstition. And then, of course, the adjective, which follows on not very long after that original citation for superstition. It comes in around about 1405. The OED gives it between 1395 and 1405, and beautifully takes us right back to Chaucer. We visited Chaucer last week, and this time it's the Franklin's Tale. To macken his yapes and his wretchedness of such a superstitious cursedness. So, superstition.
That's very cool. I liked that the Johnson definition of someone just basically just being fastidious, like overly picky about stuff, and how that's like, whether the motivation is the same or not, that's often a feature or like a signifier of superstition. Is like the outward manifestation of some superstitions are a very fastidious, like, no, I can't do that, I have to do it this way, otherwise, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, like, I'm speaking of national stereotypes rolling on through, I'm thinking of hockey players. Hockey players are famously superstitious, like pro hockey players. And so you get stories of these athletes, these like sort of top tier athletes who have achieved a level of prominence that they can demand idiotic stuff like this. But these, every now and then you get these guys that are in the league that are saying they have their very, very, very specific rituals. Game day looks like this, and it's like I eat a quarter of an apple and then go for a run and eat the rest of the apple after lunch and after, and like, but it manifests in that very fastidious attention to detail, and everything has to be just so. And then I was thinking, like, you were mentioning how religiosity and devotion to the supernatural used to be much more just sort of part of, the price of entry type of thing into society. And so it would make sense that wouldn't come about till later, because everyone by today's standards, like you say, everyone back then by today's standards was superstitious.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I
I
all
like
of their
that.
fastidiousness would have been oriented in that way.
Yeah, I like that notion. That what I was thinking about when you were explaining about the hockey players, it's like there's a set of invisible rules that they are following, and what popped into my head was that sense of standing over. It's as though there is an entity standing over you, making sure that you follow the rules.
Yeah.
Now that is, of course, hugely folky etymologically. But you know that kind of works out for me. I'm also really glad that you didn't use my most hated phrase in the universe. I mean, I say my most hated phrase. There's probably a rotation. A little bit OCD, which
oh yeah,
so annoying. I went through a phase where I would just ruthlessly correct people who used that phrase, and be like, "Oh,
right,
you have a life ruining mental illness. I'm so sorry for you," and they'd be like,
just a little bit of one.
So you're completely stymied by this terrible affliction. Oh no, that's not what I meant. It's not what I meant. It's like, well, it's not what you meant, so please don't say that. But yeah, this notion of always following the rules. And the one of the reasons why I was so interested in this, you know, as I say, I read this book this week. It was a young adult book, and one from a new set of books that we got into school. So while I was reading it, I was kind of thinking about if I was going to teach this book to a class, what sort of age would I be looking at? How would I approach it? What things would I discuss with them? And I mean, it will shock you to hear this, but sometimes teenagers are not incredibly tolerant of other cultural beliefs.
Hold on.
Yeah, and so what I was kind of considering was this idea that it's absolutely true that superstitions of a culture that you're not a part of and that you don't have much knowledge of seem crazy. In the same way that the things that we do also seem crazy to people who are not part of our culture, you know, and it's a real kind of, it gets you into a really interesting place looking at kind of dominant cultural hegemony and the sort of European-centric kind of model of things, which, I mean, let's face it, superstitions were the first casualty of colonisation, really, weren't they? These beliefs that you have are stupid.
Yeah.
They're not our beliefs, and therefore they're not allowed. Yeah.
Now that said, tell me you weren't thinking about fan death when you uttered that sentence.
Do you know, I was not thinking about fan death when fan death had not even popped into my head. I was mainly cursing myself for not having mentioned Stevie Wonder yet.
Right. Well, that is appalling.
It really is.
But
if I was some kind of like AV wizard, I would have just had that incredible riff playing over everything that I said, because it's
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Chun.
Yeah. But that's really I like that.
I love the idea that the idea of other people's cultures looking and religions looking superstitious to us, because sometimes I just have to remind myself, you know, hundreds of thousands of Christians are walking around the world right now wearing a torture device around their neck.
Sure, yeah.
Or a small representation of a torture device around their neck. And, you know, the Catholic Eucharist, they're supposedly actually drinking blood.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're not part of that tradition, that sounds really weird and really superstitious. Yeah.
Yeah.
It pales in comparison to throwing an octopus on the ice.
My favourite ever crucifix-related story, a friend of my mum's once went to buy a crucifix. She went into a jeweller where the young assistant asked her, did she want one of the wee crosses or one with the wee man on it? Right. And she's like, thousands of years of Christian heritage reduced to the one with the wee man on it.
The one with the wee man on it. Wow.
But yeah,
what's his name?
I do quite love that. You do what? Like I was raised Catholic, but my husband wasn't. So when we go to things like weddings and funerals, which tends to be the only time that I'm in church these days, the first time that happened, he was like, "What is going on? You have to sit down, and then you have to stand up, and then you have to kneel. And what's with the thing with the water? And who's that? And why is he doing this?" And I was like, "Dude, just like Catholics have not been brought up to ask questions. Come on."
Yeah.
But
it's by osmosis or bust.
He thought it was absolutely crazy. Yeah, just out of your culture equals superstitious nonsense. Of course, you could not be a dick and actually say, "Oh, cool. How come you're doing that?"
Yeah, exactly. There's always that other route.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Tell us what else is going on for the 200th anniversary of the Post, Andy. What? That's so cool. I mean, it's.
It is. I think we are the oldest magazine in the United States right now, although not necessarily the oldest continuously printed, because we did have like 2.5 years there where we were on hiatus, I guess is the nice way to put it. There's a long story there. I won't go into that. There was a lawsuit, Supreme Court thing. You can find that out if you want. But no, for all year, right now the Post is bi-monthly magazine, so we do 6 a year. So each issue of this year, we're focusing on something very specific and different. So our January-February issue, we did the Post reporting on some major world events. Like we did the death of Napoleon. There was a piece on Beethoven, a lot of Civil War stuff.
This is what I love. When you say 200 years old, my brain goes, that's pretty old. But when you say we reported on the death of Napoleon, you're like, wow. Yeah.
So I wrote a piece last week called 9 Surprising Things That Are Younger Than the Saturday Evening Post.
Oh, brilliant.
If you really want to blow your mind.
Things like that.
Yeah, the next to last one is Bolivia. And I just like putting that out there. The Saturday Evening Post is older than Bolivia.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was January, February. Our March, April issue was a lot of our favorite covers. The idea of telling an entire story in just a single cover image. The piece, the issue that we're putting to bed now, May, June, is all about fiction. We even bumped some of our usual stuff out of the way so we could put more of our fiction in there.
Outstanding.
And basically all of the great American authors of the 20th century, except Hemingway, have appeared in this Saturday Evening Post.
Hemingway was a gem.
Yeah, well, and a lot of those early ones, the Post, George Horace Lorimer, the editor-in-chief, discovered a lot of those people. Like F. Scott Fitzgerald probably would not exist as we know him without the Post. So there's a wide array of, there's a few complete short stories, and then kind of a wet your whistle excerpts from a lot of other stories from just all the names that you've heard of.
That's largely my kind of consciousness of the Saturday Evening Post is exactly as you say. It's the publication that gave people their shot, people who you could never even imagine needed a shot. Some of the greatest fiction writers that the country has ever produced.
It's like Saturday Night Live, but for fiction writers.
Yeah. So then our summer issue, our actual anniversary is in August, I believe, maybe July, but I think it's August. So for that issue, we're doing some of the best. Basically just the best articles that we've done from the 20th century. There's a famous article by Jack Alexander about AA. I'm hoping we get some Joan Didion in there if we can get the rights to it. So we're going to start putting that together next week. I'm not sure what we're doing in the fall right now. I think it's on our editorial calendar, but I'm blanking on it right now. And then our November-December issue will probably do a lot of our Christmas covers, because we have a lot of Santa Clauses and naked babies. That's the New Year's covers, but... So all year long, use special banner on the cover of the magazine. We're just like focusing on different things that the magazine has done in the last 200 years.
That's very cool. And if you happen to be kicking around the website, I did a thing for the Saturday Evening Post. So I'm technically the same as F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Whereas I am but Hemingway.
Oh, shucks. What a rum bit of
My
luck
moustache
that
is better.
Yeah, fair enough. So I did a article about because of, actually in prep for this thing, I tried to be all conniving and be like, maybe I'll pick a word that relates to the Post somehow and it'll be timely and topical. And then as I do, I got on this massive tangent. I was like, there's some cool words that first citations and stuff. So yeah.
Ryan, and then, as if you would ever go off on a massive tangent.
No. Not high. Surely not.
Yeah, it starts as an article about words that appeared in the Post, but it ends, it's all about sloths. That's all it's about.
That's exactly.
Listen, if I could find a publication who was willing to publish articles like that, I would be a famous writer.
That's right.
We could start a magazine, just call it Tangent,
Yes. It's like the cover where they give you just like the little like one line hit for what's in the article. It's literally just that's the whole lead of the article, and the rest of it is about something entirely different.
In this issue, we almost talk about the Suez Canal.
Well, I have to say, one of my favourite things about tangents, like when I said earlier, I was like, who even brought up screwdrivers? I love playing. It's like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but with your own conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like try. When you got in a Wikipedia rabbit hole.
Yes.
And suddenly 3 hours have passed, and you're reading about. I spent quite a long time reading about members of the Irish, minor members of the Irish aristocracy in South America. Dude, honestly, it sounds completely crazy, but holy
That's
shit, there is
amazing.
some mental stuff going on. You wouldn't believe how many incredibly jammy Irishmen helped to shape parts of the history of the continent of South America. I mean, of course, according to the white-faced people. But
right, yeah, obviously.
But yeah, it's this actually, speaking of connecting tangents, this came out of Che. Remember I said Che yesterday? The name Che came up in conversation, and my husband said, "What's Che short for anyway? Is it Chemund?" And then I laughed for about an hour at Chemund Guevara. But Chemund Guevara, as I have now christened him, because I had said, I'm sure his name was Ernesto, but I don't know why he was called Che. So we had a little chat about potential, because Ross said, I'm sure it was a nickname. I'm like, well, of course it was a nickname. we couldn't find out what the origin of the nickname was. But Che Guevara's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, his surname was Lynch, and he was an Irishman.
Huh.
And you go,
wow.
Huh? But like I'm telling you, go and look this up. It's super duper interesting. But sometimes you find yourself in that situation where you're reading about the history of forks, and you think, how did I get here?
How did this come to be?
How did this happen to me?
6 Degrees of Wikipedia is a fun game.
Oh
like,
yeah.
You see how far you can get in 6 clicks, and you can get pretty far sometimes.
I just love it. The random, often bizarre connections between stuff. It's it's basically why the internet is awesome. I mean, there's lots of reasons why the internet isn't awesome, but being able to just find a million tons of information really, really quickly.
Well,
I mean, it's terrible
Can
for
I
my
get from Ted Danson to the ancient Phoenicia in 6 clicks or less? The answer is yes. I just don't know how, but I know you can do it.
Yeah, it's really, really bad for my kind of workflow and productivity, but still, I like it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Well, Andy, thank you very much
Thank
for
you so much.
joining us.
having me. It's fun.
Yeah. What a delight.
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard in this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.